Good. So we'll have a 1 hour workshop. Deepak is going to take this workshop. So initial 15-20 minutes, Deepak will explain about his journey. How did he start kayaking? What are the different types of kayaks that we have? And many more questions will be answered. And the next 30 minutes, maybe we can have a Q&A session where all the participants can ask whatever questions you want, and Deepak will surely answer that. Two things: you can ask the question in the chat box during the workshop as well, or you can ask the questions, unmute yourself, and then ask the questions. I
Or else
hope
you
that
can
is fine
raise
with
your
them.
hand.
Yeah, you can also raise your hand, and then you can ask a question. Over to you, Deepak. You can start the workshop. All the best.
Yeah, thanks, Snehankit and Anish, for setting this up. Hello, friends. I hope the voice is clear to all of you. So, before we begin, I just want to set an outline for the next 20 minutes. I'll tell you about myself, my interest in sports in general and water sports in particular, and how we are together building a community of people who are interested to explore water sports around Mumbai and elsewhere around the country. And there are a lot of stories to share during this next session. Hopefully, some of these will infect you for those who have not experienced it and are waiting to just be on the waters or try out. We hope we'll infect you with some good motivation today. So before I begin, if all of you can access your chat box and let me know if you have done kayaking before, which place have you done kayaking? And if not, you could just write, one that you want to do. Right, I keep seeing the messages pouring in. India has a few centers of kayaking around, in a couple of them in North and quite a few in the Central and South India. I see participants who have done kayaking in Mangalore. And as we thought that this workshop would bring in participants who want to know more about what this activity is, we gathered quite a few of you want to take this up. Thanks for the replies. So, for me, so I'm 35 years old and I live in a town called Ulhasnagar, which is in the north part of Mumbai, a north suburb of Mumbai. And a river by the same name as our town, Ulhas River, flows through just a few kilometers away from where I live. My interest in sports has picked up relatively more recently. For kayaking, it's been about 3 years that I've taken up active interest in this water sport. And I'll narrate to you how I got hooked into it. So the poster that you see in front of you is of my wife, Shilpa. We got married 3 years ago. And during one of our early after marriage trips to the coastal part of Maharashtra, for those who may be familiar with a place called Ratnagiri, south of Ratnagiri, there is another district, Sindhudurg, which has an active water sports hub called Tarkarli and Malwan. So Shilpa, my wife, and I, we were on our trip to Tarkarli, where besides the most popular water sports of scuba diving, parasailing at such places, we also, for the first time, experienced what kayaking is. Till then, I probably had a very rough idea of kayaking and canoeing, because both of these are very active Olympic sports, though it's a very niche activity in our geography, but very popular in countries like Germany, Australia, and the US. So in that first trip, when I felt that both of us were able to pick up this new sport as a beginner quite well, once we were back home after the trip, I was wondering how I could explore more of this sport around my place. So thanks to my wife for being my constant partner in these outdoor activities that I've built a sustained interest. Prior to this, I have been doing cycling, including long distance cycle touring. So on my professional side, there's another activity that I do, which is build indoor swimming pools, and that's how my relation with water sport has increased over the past 2 years. I'm a hardware engineer by profession. Now, coming to this activity that we put together along with Decathlon, I remember 12 years ago, Decathlon set up their first store in Bangalore, which is 2008 or so. A large store which is very new as a concept in a country which takes little interest in sports besides cricket or a couple of other sports like football or hockey. And I appreciate Decathlon for venturing so much in our country, spreading across multiple cities and setting up close to 75 stores over these 12 years, which I feel is a remarkable achievement. And thereby bringing in a culture of sports and making accessible a lot of sports accessories to us. So very recently, when I visited to Decathlon store to buy a few accessories, I saw that Decathlon has started to stock in kayaks. And we're wondering, how do we build a community for people to start exploring this? So Keshav at the Decathlon Thane store and I were just wondering that when people come to buy a bicycle, for example, we know where to cycle around in our neighborhood, but how do we know where to take up kayaking? And this session has come up after about a year of working together to build a community of people who take interest in water sports, and having conducted a lot of real sessions out in one of the rivers near Mumbai. We'll talk about that. So for those of you who can see the screen, these are a few pics from our events that we have organized in Bhatsa River. I'll tell you more about this place in a moment. Where we have had different types of groups, families, and children exploring the water sport. We usually take in a group of 6 to 8 people at a time, and we spend about an hour, preferably in the mornings and sometimes even during the evenings, for this kayaking session. What you saw earlier was a single-seater kayak, and what you see now is a tandem kayak which can take 2 adults and a kid. So a small family can do this as a recreational sport. I've had a lot of joy when young children who overcome their fear of water by challenging themselves to get into the waters and get comfortable in a moving vehicle, in their words, in a kayak. We occasionally do late evening sessions, especially during the full moon nights, because the river is lit up very well by the moonlight on the full moon nights, offering a different perspective of kayaking and the serenity around during those evening hours. So let's take a little step high up in the sky and see where all such water sport activities are being practiced around in India. These are a few of the centers that I know of and have interacted with people who run these water sports. In North, some of you may have explored whitewater rafting in the Ganga River at Rishikesh. In the central India, Mumbai, Tarkarli, and down in Karnataka, Kerala, and Tamil Nadu, there are quite a few academies who train people into kayaking, and the water sport is taken up by a lot of people around there. If you go off coast into the islands, Andaman and Nicobar has such amazing offers for water sports, including snorkeling, scuba diving, because the waters are much clearer out there, and there is a good amount of diverse marine life that one gets to see by trying out the underwater sports. One of you mentioned that you have done kayaking with Kayak Boy in Mulki, Sushant. There is another jellyfish water sports in Calicut, and Good Wave Adventures in Bangalore. They host a few sessions around Bangalore. Closer home, this is the map of Mumbai and the geography around it. So let me share to us about the river bodies that flow around Mumbai. The three circles that you see in this photo are of the three major reservoirs which supply water to Mumbai, and they also lead to the rivers. Vaitarna, Tansar, and Bhatsa. The green is Vaitarna in the north, and the red is Bhatsa river. And our kayaking activity is near Shahapur along the Mumbai-Nasik highway, just off it, which we do in Bhatsa river, which originates from the reservoir by the same name. So a lot of first timers, and some of you may have this question. For those of you feel that, do you need to know swimming to be able to do kayaking? That's a very first question, because a lot of us have a fear of water. So let me address that concern head away. We take good safety while we do this sport, while we train the first timers into the sport of kayaking. And the nature of kayaking that we do at these places is recreational, flat water river kayaking, which is very steady during the whole time that we are out in the river. We also take safety through wearing a personal flotation device, and we have lifeguard at our availability while we do this activity. So a lifeguard accompanies us when we do this session. So, well, it's good to know. If you know swimming, I'll tell you more about what we do besides kayaking when we hang out around these rivers. However, one doesn't necessarily need to know swimming to be able to do kayaking and enjoy it thoroughly. However, as we progress to be able to do sea kayaking or ocean kayaking, which is a different league in itself, knowledge of swimming is essential. Let me take you through the variety of equipment that we use in our sessions. So on the left, you see these single-seater kayaks. These are rigid kayaks, and they can lift individuals up to a weight of 100 kgs and are quite steady in the flat waters. These are called sit-on kayaks. Later, we will see some of the other versions. On the right, you see two tandem kayaks. One is an inflatable 3-seater, and another is a rigid kayak. So the inflatable kayak can actually be packed in a 4-wheeler and can be set up near the river or any water body for that matter. So this allows you to be able to take your kayak along with you and start kayaking. The ones that are tandem can be about 12-13 feet long. The photo on the right is from the Decathlon store. In this photo, what you see on the left is also a 4-seater kayak. And the photo on the right shows a sport kayak. Now, sport kayaks are relatively unstable. It takes a little bit of training to be able to move in them, but they are so good when you want to do long-distance kayaking. These photos are from a center in Pune that offers kayaking in the Bhimashankar River around Pune. Now let me spend a moment and tell you more about how I got inspired, and I hope some of you will read more stories of kayaking around. So as I mentioned, after my trip to Tarkali, Malvan, where I and my wife got exposed to kayaking, when I came back to Mumbai, I was wondering how to figure out how popular kayaking was as an activity here. And while I knew that there are a lot of cycling hubs in different places, like Bandra Cycling Club or Thane Cycling Club, I didn't know much about, and it took me some time to know about people who own a kayak of their own and are regular into it. So the photo that you see is of Kaustubh Khade, who you wouldn't believe, has done really long distance kayaking, including 20-day, close to a 20-day kayaking from Mumbai to Goa, covering a distance of 600 kilometers in about 20 days. So Kaustubh has practiced kayaking in what was otherwise called H2O Sports Club in Girgaon Chopati. This particular place is no more functional. However, he used to practice in and around Gateway of India and Kolaba to be able to train himself for long distance kayaking. So the first person whom I got inspired to buy my own equipment, buy my own kayak, is Kaustubh Khare. He currently lives in Bangalore. And let me tell you more. It's not just the trip of 600 kilometers. After having got the bug of doing long distance endurance kayaking, Kaustubh took up a big challenge. Guess what? He traveled from Gujarat, Kutch in Gujarat, to Kanyakumari down south, a distance of close to 3,000 kilometers over 3 months of kayaking. Can you imagine that? So Kaustubh has earlier done competitive level kayaking, represented India in Asian championships for different varieties of kayaking and canoeing, and has been an inspiration for many of us to take up this sport. Now, I have more surprise for you. If you wondered that 3,000 kilometers is indeed a big deal, let me tell you about this strong woman. Strong, I think that word is insufficient to describe this German kayaker, Freya, who has circumnavigated countries and continents. Freya has done a circumnavigation of multiple continents. The particular one that I read a full book on her is circumnavigation of Australia, a total distance of about 18,000 kilometers spread across 300 days of kayaking. Imagine people taking up such huge challenges through the sport. What you see in the previous photo and this photo, the kind of kayak is suitable for doing sea kayaking or ocean kayaking. These are called ski kayaks, and these are made of carbon fibers. They help cut through the waves and have a necessary speed when doing ocean kayaking. You can read more about it. I'll share in the links in the chat box about these two marvelous, inspirational kayakers. Coming back to the sessions that we organize at Vasint, which is just about an half an hour distance from Kalyan, and about an hour from Thane or central Mumbai. So at Vasint, we organize weekly sessions. These have been typically on weekends, though we have now also offered weekday sessions with prior bookings. So what you see is an instructor explaining how to kayak in a small pool before we actually get into the waters, into the river waters, including being able to restore the kayak if in case it topples, which generally doesn't happen in the nature of water that we are kayaking. I'll delve a moment into the way we handle the oar stick. So since these are mechanically powered sport, we use a lightweight aluminum or fiber oar stick with pedals on each side. And we push the water back alternatively to be able to propel ahead. We can take a reverse stroke by pushing the water ahead. Now, for a moment, if you extend your hands where you are, if your hands are free, and try to imagine holding an 8-foot long stick in your hand. And you would normally think of propelling the water back by pushing the corresponding hand behind you, by pulling the water behind you. So, however, as we pick up kayaking, we know that kayaking is more of a push sport, push activity as compared to pulling. So with the opposite hand, which is in the air, we do a push force, right? So that the paddle which is in the water pushes the water behind. And as we grow further in the technique, we also explain how to use the body core to be able to do long distance kayaking without getting tired, as against using shoulders and arms during this activity. We take safety precautions by wearing a personal flotation device which keeps us afloat in case we ever topple in the waters. Once the participants are ready to set into the kayak, we go in as a group. A couple of stories that I must add in. As I mentioned, that some of us do carry a fear of being in the water, especially huge water bodies like the river, especially in the urban setting where we have very little exposure being in the rivers. So this photo is of a close friend's wife who recently did a kayaking session with us. She had an episode of near-death experience of drowning when she was about 5-6 years old, but was rescued. Unfortunately, a couple of other visitors with her were not could not be rescued back then. So this impression from the childhood had remained with this participant for long, and was quite afraid to put a step into the boat. After a little bit of coaxing and seeing the other participants getting comfortable with being in the kayak, this participant broke down her fear and came with us, spent about half an hour in the kayaking. We have had couples coming in during special sessions. This one was on a Valentine's special held in the month of February at the same spot at Wasan in Kayaking, in the Batsa River there. This photo is of Ulas River near Karjat, which is on, again, further north of Kalyan on the train route. And you can see as we step out early in the morning, a lot of birds fly up. I also have a video of this I can share it. We get to see a lot of bird life, exotic birds, kingfishers, when we do this activity. Now, one might guess whether this activity can also be done during the monsoons. So the answer is during the early and the late monsoons, as you see in this photo. It's such a pleasant experience to be out there. On this particular occasion and a few others, we have had water drizzling in from the top while we are in the water body. So this has been an amazing experience for some of us who have done this during the monsoons. As one might assume, there are also people for whom water is really their livelihood. Water offers the livelihood. So this is an example of fishermen in Ulhas River going about by their daily routine, spreading the net and collecting the fishes. And voila! Sometimes we get to make friendships with the fishermen and get to see the catch they had for the day. What else? Is it just kayaking or something more? So after about an hour of kayaking that we do at Wasin, we park our kayaks near the river bank and we take a dip in the cool flowing waters of the river. Is that all? No, there is more. So very recently we also introduced, this is on an experimental basis, we also introduced snorkeling in the river. Now, one would typically think of snorkeling and scuba diving, doing such activities in the ocean sides where there's deep marine life. However, it's also eminently doable in the river waters where we go in. So, the places which have a rocky bed offer a good view of the river bed through snorkeling. So, we take a break off during kayaking and try this out for those who are ready to see the water life and the life underwater. I must take one small moment as we talk about exploring the water bodies around us. For those who may be following the state of condition of the terrible condition of the water bodies around Mumbai, be it Mithi River, some of the other lakes that we have around Mumbai, Powai, So this photo is of Ulhas River, where in the recent times a large amount of uh, dump that gets accumulated into the river, or the sewage that gets accumulated into the river, results into formation of water hyacinth, which is the green carpet uh, around these rivers. So personally speaking, my interest 3 years ago was as much of a sport as much as it was to explore the state of affairs with the rivers around us. So, not so long ago in the civilization, as I say, most of the civilizations developed, grew, thrived around the water bodies. It's only very recently that we live so far away from the water bodies and are able to thrive in. However, the impact of the human activities has been seen on these water bodies. And so, one part activity that I do get engaged is into cleaning up of the river while we do kayaking, as well as tying up with certain foundations which are working on restoration of water bodies around Mumbai. Okay, so that ends my stories. Some of the stories, there'll be more in during the Q&A that I would remember again. This is the page, and I welcome you to join us during one of the sessions as and when the lockdown allows us to meet up together. Thanks. We're open for your stories and your questions.
Thank you so much, Deepak. It was a lovely session. Participants, if you guys want to ask any questions regarding kayaking, water sports, any questions, please go ahead. You can unmute yourself, you can raise your hand, or you can ask a question in the chat box. Go ahead.
Uh, Hi Deepak, this is Vaishak here from Kerala.
Hi, Vaishak. Yes.
How are you?
I'm good. Thanks, Vaishak. Yeah. Lovely to see you joining in from Kerala.
Yeah. It was a good session altogether, right? Got to know a lot of things. I just wanted to ask you something, like because of all the pictures that you showed in the presentation, I've noticed that the kayaks which you use and the water basically is still water, right? So what do you do? Let's say you have high currents and low currents, right? So you usually have water coming in and flowing out of rivers per se if it's connected to sea. So are like can we use our refit or uh, basically still water kayaks in those conditions, or do you like follow some procedures or some precautions that you take? Like, could you show some light on that?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Vaishak, for bringing that point in. So, for the just to give a larger scope to what you just asked, the photos were indeed from a place which has flat waters in them. It's a flat water recreational kayaking that we have been doing, that I have been exposed to. Now, what you mentioned is about rivers which have a flow, which has waves in it, and the kayaking in such waters is called kayaking with rapids, right? Be it upstream or downstream, against the water rapids. And these water rapids can range from what has been notified as grade 0 to grade 5 rapids. So there are different suggested equipments, kayak equipments for each for flat waters, for rivers with rapids, and for sea and ocean kayaking, as we saw an example. So yes, so in case we are using a sit-on top kayak, as you saw, we may be able to cross, if we are going upstream, max of maybe grade 1 rapids. However, the same can be used for downstream with higher rapids. There are cavities in the sit-on top kayaks which allow the water not to accumulate in the kayak. Right? So that's an answer to your question. What if the water gets on board the kayak? So for the sit-on top kayaks, there are cavities which act as drain holes for the water, and these holes also serve a purpose to balance the kayak when we are on it in the river.
No, my question was, yeah, that answers partly my question. So my question exactly was, okay, let's say you go downstream in a kayak and you have to go back the same way, right? So let's say per se, if we are using a sit on top kayak and you go downstream, and would you face some difficulties when you're rowing back upstream, or would you have to use a separate kayak? And also, how do you measure the grades of currents?
Right. So the journey that we normally do in the flat water is upstream and downstream both. However, for those places which offer downstream kayaking, do not necessarily offer a complete circuit whereby you do necessarily an upstream, because for beginning level kayakers, it may be tricky to be able to read the rapids and be able to navigate oneself in the kayak. So even for downstream kayaking, I would presume that some amount of training is needed to be able, definitely there's some amount of training needed to be able to read the waves and navigate yourself to prevent toppling over. That's one. Choosing a different kayak for upstream, as I said, yes, if one has to navigate rapids upstream, the boat has to be more the kayak has to be more streamlined. Usually people choose sit-in kayaks for such for being able to cross rapids upstream.
All right.
Yeah.
So the fee is different in sit-in kayaks, is it, or do you need like more training, like you mentioned earlier?
Yeah. So sit-on kayaks, the ones that we talked about, and that were there in the photos, are inherently stable. So if you don't move around, you sit on the kayak, you're stable. However, the sit-in kayaks, where the legs go in and there's a oval cavity through which the body goes into the kayak, those sit-in kayaks are inherently unstable. So they need constant balancing to just be even staying at one place when on the waters. So they definitely need more training, as well as in case the kayak topples, there are different ways to restore the sit-on ones and the sit-in ones.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, hi Deepak. This is Kayur here.
Hi, Kayur.
Hey Deepak, thanks for putting up this community for the kayak enthusiast. I think it's a quite a noble concept, and looking forward to learn a lot from this. And my question for now is, I stay at Mira Road, and the water body that is closest to me is the Gorai Belt. Would like to know, what is it that, what are the permissions that are required to venture into it? So can I just take a kayak and venture into it, or are there any permissions required from the local authorities to venture?
Right. So yeah, talking about permissions to get into the water bodies, creeks and seas and oceans come under the Naval Guard's permission. So Coast Guard's permission is definitely needed if one wants to do any water activity in the creeks. While the rivers that we go into are relatively permission free when we do kayaking in small groups.
Okay, and okay, so would you be aware? How do I get these permissions from Naval?
From the Coast Guard, I'll have to check specifically for Mira Baimer. I can definitely check out with Kaustubh, who has explored these waters.
Okay.
And the other ones around Mumbai. Yeah.
Thanks. That should be useful. Sure. I'm there on the WhatsApp group, and if you could share, that will be useful.
I'll do that.
Thanks so much.
Hi Deepak, I wanted to ask, what is the difference between kayaking and canoeing?
Right, thanks Madhura for asking that. So talking about the Olympic sport of kayak and canoe, these are slightly different designs, and the way they are maneuvered in the water is different. The kayak oar stick, so first talking just about the way we maneuver them, then talking about the design of the boat. So in kayak, as you saw, that the pedal there are two pedals. So we do alternate pedaling to propel ahead as far as kayaking is concerned. In canoeing, it's a single-sided pedal, and therefore we usually canoe on just one side of the water. And the way we do the strokes for canoeing is different, because we are just pedaling the water in a single direction most of the time, as compared to kayaking, where we have left and right both options to maneuver. I would encourage you to watch videos of canoeing to get the difference. There's yet another water sport called rowing, where this is a team sport where four members or eight members would be facing the direction where would be facing opposite of the direction where the boat is moving, and there is one guide which synchronizes the movements of the eight rowers at a time. So rowing is another great Olympic sport. A lot of interesting videos on YouTube.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Also, where is your site? Where are you located? Like, where do you practice kayaking? Like, if any of us want to come there and practice once this COVID is done.
Right. So the place where we are able to rent out more kayaks, six kayaks, is Vasind, where some of the other Decathlon members have participated in the past. So that's near Kalyan, about half an hour from Kalyan. And I do my practice around Badlapur, Ulhasnagar, and Kalyan belt of Ulhas River. You're welcome to join closer here once the lockdown opens.
Sure, sure.
We had someone who was raising his hand. You can go ahead.
It's Vinay, I guess.
Yes, Vinay, do you want to ask any question? You can go ahead, or you can type in the chat box. Till then, Deepak, I'll ask you one question. So, suppose I am a beginner who wants to practice, start a sport called kayaking, a niche sport. Which kayak, and I want to buy one kayak. Which kayak would you recommend? A rigid one or an inflatable one? And what can you explain the difference between the two kayaks?
Right. So yeah, thanks, Anish, for putting that across. So I'll address the buying part later, but let's try to understand the difference between these rigid types and the inflatable types. So if I have to give a similar example into cycling, there are foldable bicycles which can be put in trunks of cars or can be loaded onto buses and trains, and one can cross certain distance using a public transport before actually doing cycling. So inflatable kayaks are a little like foldable bikes, which can be assembled on site, and they're compact to carry around. While the rigid ones can definitely be transported on top of a car with a carrier. However, if you go for a tandem or longer sized sea kayaks, then navigating them through the inner roads is a bit tricky, especially at the toll booths, etc. So, so that's about the transportability of these two types of kayaks. The second element is so I have a two-seater inflatable kayak that I have taken quite a few places around for its convenience. However, from a life point of view, life of the equipment, rigid kayaks can handle a lot of abuse or rough use in the waters. Like occasionally we see stones, rocks in the rivers where we may dash in. Especially if we are doing kayaking in rapids, we may just hit the bank of the river where there may be rocks. So inflatables are prone to risk of getting damaged at such places where there may be sharp objects in the river, while rigid kayaks are having do normally have a long life, 12-15 years. They can easily go in. So from keeping that in mind, I think if you can bear the inconvenience of transporting it, I would recommend a rigid kayak over an inflatable in the environments that we live in.
Are the rigid kayaks stable
Say that again.
as compared? Are the inflatable kayaks stable as compared to the rigid ones?
Both the sit-on kayaks that we saw across these photos are equally stable.
Okay.
Do we have chances of puncture, like when we,
We
talk
do,
about it?
right. So if, as I said, if there are sharp stones that we may hit when in an uncontrolled way, then the inflatable one does puncture. My kayak has had 3 punctures that I have repaired with the patch kit that comes with it, and I'm now able to use it.
Right. No, my question is, let's say you're, let's say, in the middle of the river and you notice that your kayak is punctured and
Right.
what
Right.
do you do?
Right. So the one that I have has three chambers. So the chances of puncture are usually with a single chamber, which allows enough time and air and buoyancy to be able to bring yourself to the riverbank site, repair it, and then relaunch yourself.
Okay, you're talking about the equipped kayaks, right? Or
The
what's
inflatable kayaks, correct?
equipped? The decathlon ones, yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So right, so the Decathlon has an IT-bit range, and yeah, these they come with a patch kit. I'm guessing that you can repair by yourself, just like a bicycle tube repair.
Uh,
Yes, Vinay. Snagit, just a
yeah,
second.
yeah,
Vinay wants
fine.
to ask something. Yeah, yeah.
May I?
Go ahead, Vinay.
Yeah,
Sure,
thanks a
sure.
lot. I mean, my mic was not working, so I had to get out and come in again. Uh,
Not a problem. Not
so,
a
uh,
problem. Go ahead.
Deepak, I mean, I normally call him Malani, so nice hearing the talk. Thanks a lot for inviting me.
Yeah. Thanks,
And
Vinay, from joining in from Germany. Yeah.
yeah, and it was really nice to hear all the things. I mean, Malani and we are from the both from the same college, and since a lot of study is needed to get into these institutes, we unfortunately are not exposed to sports as much. And the educational system in India is that sports is definitely at the least priority. And frankly, like Malani, I also started to do sports after I started working. So that was when we actually got time to venture into sports. So I mean, since I've been in Germany for like now 7 years, I've done a lot of it. I have two daughters, and both are way into sports. And here they train like anything. I mean, kids are like put into sports right from the beginning. That's a completely different system. Study happens, but sports is a very important part of the life. And kayaking, I mean, Malani, I spoke with you earlier also. That's a wonderful sport. It puts you like in touch with the nature, and that's simply wonderful what you are doing. So, I mean, my best wishes, and I look forward to join you the next time I come to India.
Yeah. Thanks, Vinay, for that note.
I mean, that was just a remark. I don't have any questions. So let's
Sure.
dive into a session when we come, and then
Yeah.
I'll trouble you with the questions.
Sure.
Thanks, Vinay. Thank you for coming.
Yash has posted a question. If I can read that, do you recommend using inflatable kayak in the sea? I would not recommend. I have a story of Kaustubh and a couple of his friends who have taken inflatable kayaks in the sea. I'll mention a reason for that. The sea kayaks are designed to be able to cross and cut the waves and have offer a much lesser drag when on the waters compared to the sit-on kayaks or the inflatable kayaks. So the inflatable kayaks are good for recreational flat water or grade 0, grade 0.5 kind of water rapids. But trying them out in the sea, maybe for short distance, not venturing too far into the sea, may be okay. But I have stories and written stories. I can share a link later of people who have struggled, till the sunset hours just to reach back the coast on time because they used inflatable kayak.
Uh, yeah, Deepak, may I ask one question?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so when you describe a drag, so there are two many type of inflatable kayaks available in the market. So there are some kayaks which are low pressure and some kayaks are a high pressure. So what's the difference between both of those?
Right. I'll have to educate myself a bit more to know how the experience is different between low pressure. So the one that I have goes just around 2 psi, while the high pressure ones take in more. I'll have to educate myself before I can answer that certainly.
Okay, okay, that's fine. That's fine. That's okay.
Hi, Deepak. I just have one more question for
Please
you.
do. Yeah,
I'm bugging you with a lot of questions today. Yeah.
you're welcome to.
Right. So, Deepak, just could you just shed some light on the safety equipments that we use? Let's say life jackets. Like how long can, in case you topple, right? How long can you be in the water with the life jacket? Let's say the It ones or
Yeah.
some other brand that you suggest.
Right. So thanks for asking that. That's a very pertinent question, and I'm happy that you asked that question. So the personal flotation devices, PFDs as they are called, the ones that we use, are slightly different from probably the purpose that life jacket serves in. So the personal flotation devices, the ones that I have seen available at Decathlon, um, they come in two specifications, 50 Newton and 100 Newtons. Each one of them offers different amount of buoyancy. The one with 50 Newtons, I read, can take in a weight of 100 kgs for about 4 hours before the foam inside the flotation device saturates with water, resulting into drowning. In case you don't know how to swim, so 4 hours is the time with the one of the PFD devices available at Decathlon, and I think twice as much time if you are on the flotation device with higher cap- uh, you know, capacity, higher.
Yeah. So just one thing, if I'm not wrong, Decathlon, I think offers two types of life jackets. One is the kayaking ones, and the second one is the sailing one, right? So I think the ones you're referring to is the sailing ones, the longer ones, right?
I'll have to check again for their specification, but 50 newtons and 100 newtons is what I read in their technical specs. These are two types.
Okay.
Both can be used for kayaking as well. And you could also keep, I mean, one could also keep additional flotation device if, on the boat if one really needs a feel for that extra safety.
All right, all right.
Yeah, and since we are not talking about that, in case if we ever go into the waters and have a flotation device worn on our body and we fall onto the waters, we tell our participants to float in such a way that your back is on the water while you are looking up into the sky, as against floating on the stomach with eyes and mouth down in the river, because the the second situation is more panic causing because one may just gulp in amount of water. So floating on the back is how, because once we fall off the boat we may fall in any position, but the position which is safer to get rescued by oneself or by the lifeguard is by floating on the back.
Any more questions, guys? Go on. Vaishak, you can ask more questions. We don't mind. We'll be happy.
No worry, I'm all out for today. Maybe in the next session.
So there's
Okay, so
a
in case you want to check for any of Decathlon products, you can WhatsApp me. I'll also share the voucher code with all the people who are here in the workshop. In case you want to buy anything from Decathlon, any Decathlon products, I'll share a special voucher code in the chat box immediately. You can use my voucher code and you can get a chance to win gift worth rupees 2,000 to 5,000.
Sure, buddy. Thanks.
I've just shared the
Yeah,
video.
Deepak, the,
Yeah.
You're based out of which Decathlon store?
Decathlon
sorry,
Thane.
You're based out of which Decathlon store?
Decathlon Thane. You stay in Mira Road, okay? You can visit our store anytime. Right
Yeah,
now
yeah,
we
I
are
do
closed,
visit it
but as soon as
often.
we open,
Yeah, I do visit it often for cycling stuff. Yeah, I haven't tried any kayak so far over there. And yeah, we'll plan out
next time
sometime.
you visit, yeah, next time you visit my store, you surely I'll be there in water sports. You can come and meet me for sure.
Sure, yes. Sorry, Harnish. Yeah, sure.
So that was a short video made by Gaurav.
Deepak, yes, I want to ask something. Yeah. Do you have any places in Mumbai for kayaking?
Yes, which place are you located in? If you can mention that, I can assist you a little more. Okay, Malhad, right. So Kayur is from Mira Road, and he just asked the question about places around Mira. So yes, the photos that you saw, most of them were from a place called Vasind, and name of the river is Bhatsa River. Vasind is about an hour and 15 minutes drive from Dadar, north of it, further north of Thane. That's a place we have been doing kayaking. Now, since your question is around Mumbai, I mentioned to you there was H2O water sports in Girgaon Chopati. Now the place is shut, but maybe you can try out with a couple of sailing clubs who also offer kayaking in Kolaba. Uh, there is one that is run uh, by someone I know. I'll just share in the link for that. I think it's called Explore Sailing. Aisha Logo is the name of the sailor who organizes this. Discovered Sailing. So you can check this place called Discovered Sailing in Kolaba. They also have a fleet of kayaks, and you can do in kayaking there.
In case, guys, I've shared the WhatsApp our kayaking community link as well. In case you guys are not there in the group, you can click on the link and join the group. And yes, even I stay in Kandivli, buddy. I'll be doing going for kayak very soon. Maybe you can ping me and join me for kayaking.
Yeah. Deepak,
How much does the voucher code offer, Harnish? How much discount does it offer? I'm excited.
So it does not offer. It's not a discount voucher code.
Okay.
If you apply that voucher code at the end of the month, there's a lucky draw. So 10 lucky customers win a gift voucher worth rupees 2,000 to 5,000.
Sure. Oh.
Deepak, just one more thing. Like you had mentioned a technical term to like measure the flow of water, right? Could you please repeat it again?
Is your question about the different types of rapids and how to know
Yeah,
what grade?
rapid. Okay,
Yeah.
exactly.
I think the measure of water speed is done in knots, which is nautical miles per hour. So there is, I'll have to look into the numbers to give an exact answer, but depending on the nautical miles per hour, equivalent of kmph, for water flow, we know what types of rapids these are. So just the speed of the water flow at any given place is a determination for the kind of rapid it is. So, but just to give example, I think in Ganga, one usually sees grade 3, 4 kind of rapids for those who do kayaking or whitewater rafting up north.
Like, do we have like a website to or a place or an application to know the rapid or?
If you just spare me a minute, I'll just dig in my notes on the rapid. The information should be there on Google. If you just search with rapid query, rapid kayak and knots. Nautical miles per hour for different types of rapids. On Wikipedia, there is a scale called International Scale of River Difficulty, which talks of class 1 to class 6 rapids. I think it's also with the predictability of the wave, not just the water speeds, as I see. I'm copying that link into the chat box.
All
So,
right, got it. Thank you.
yeah, yeah. So, Vaishak, I've lived in Calicut for 4 years, and as I mentioned early on, Jellyfish Water Sports is one of the organizing body for kayaking in and around Calicut. They recently organized a 2-day kayak festival in the backwaters of which city? This city in the
Kodungalur. I'm actually from
ah,
there.
okay, okay, right. So in
Great fact.
mid Feb, they organized a festival which they have been organizing for 4 years now. So you could join them to experience different levels of kayaking.
Yeah.
Lovely. In an hour, I think I was able to present some stories.
Vaishak, anyone else? You want to ask any questions? Vaishak, you seem very passionate about kayaking. Have
Tell
you
us
been
more about yourself.
practicing?
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Sorry.
Vaishak,
You
tell
have
us more
you.
about yourself and your
What?
interest in sports. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I do a little bit of surfing, bodyboarding. I've tried kayaking a bit. With jellyfish as well. I was in Calicut for a while. I used to work for Decathlon for a while as well. Now I'm actually thinking of buying a kayak. So I was, you know, gathering a lot of inputs that could help me.
Vaishak, you have my voucher code now. You can use that voucher
Yeah,
code.
bro, I'll definitely pick it up. Yeah.
Lovely to know that. Yeah.
Okay,
Deepak, when
we'll.
were you in Calicut? Like,
Yeah.
which year?
Good.
I was there in NIT Calicut between 2003 and 7 for 4 years.
Oh, all right. Oh, jellyfish goes way back, huh?
No,
2003.
no, no, no. I got to know about Jellyfish much recently. I think they are also a very recent organization. And someone from Bangalore, another group called Good Wave Adventures, they helped set up some of these festivals in Kerala, kayak festivals around Kerala.
Yeah, and you're talking about a guy called Kaustup. Is the guy from Mangalore, the guy in the Navy?
No, Kaustubh has no association with the Navy. Um, the Mangalore reference or the Mulki reference is Saurabh. Uh, he runs. He goes by the name Kayak Boy on his
Yeah,
internet
I
handles.
know.
Yeah.
I've been to Kayak Boy, yes.
Yes, yes, yeah. So,
So Deepak, I want to ask one question. There are different type of kayaks, so there will be a different type of pedals too, right? So what all categories are there? Can you please put some light on that?
are you asking the question about the pedals that we use for pushing the
Yes,
water?
yes, 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 yes.
I think they would differ. They differ in the nature of the material, the lightweight and the strength of the material. Uh, and then there are ones which can allow you to adjust the two pedals in a non-parallel way, which is usually good if you are doing kayaking in the sea where there are headwinds or tailwinds or side winds, so that when you just move the paddle in the air, it just chops the air. So the slight variation in the design of those.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
the
Deepak, it's okay. Okay, go ahead, Frank. Go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
okay, okay. Stiffness of the particular material does matter, or is fine if it's more flexible or is what?
I think yeah, at the early stages we may not be able to see much difference so subtle in a subtle way about the thickness of the pedals. The only thing is they should float on the water in case you miss them, and they should not break easily in case you put some load or you strike a solid object and in the reverse. This is the condition.
Okay, okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sure. Thank you, Yash, Vaishak,
Deepak,
keep,
we'll
keeping
end
this
this
session
workshop
quite
here.
engaging. Yeah,
Yeah, thank you everyone. Thank you, Yash. Thank you, Vaishak, for your wonderful questions. Thank you, Deepak, for this amazing workshop.
my
Hopefully,
pleasure.
we'll have more workshops in the future. It's great to
Yeah,
have you.
and more participants who actually come down to our Vasan Center.
Hopefully, yes.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot
Thank
of
you
people who have
very much.
joined
It
our
was
group.
actually an amazing workshop. Thank you, Deepak, for your all of your insights.
Sure.
Yeah,
Well,
give me a call when you come down to Calicut again. I'll let you know.
sure, sure, Vaishak.
All the
Let's
best.
let's connect more again on our interest in water sports.
Yes, yes, definitely. See you guys then. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye, bye. Thank you.
Bye, Hardish.
I'll give you bye Deepak. I'll give you a call in some 5 minutes.
Sure. All right. Thanks.
Bye, Deepak.
Bye bye.
Bye.